Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Real Estate Note Investing Be the Bank broadcast. I'm your host, Justin Bogard, and today is February 9th, Wednesday, 2022. This is the second broadcast of 2022, and we're excited to get into this stuff today. So we got some news headline articles that we're going to be talking about, kind of look back at what the forbearances have done and kind of where we are today, and I'm going to have a case study for you too. Stay tuned. Richard Thornton, how are you today, sir?
Mr. Bogard, very good, sir. And yourself?
I'm doing okay. It's warmed up a little bit today. It got up to about 45 today, Richard.
I didn't ask you that. I was going to ask you that earlier, but
no rain, no snow today. A little bit warmer, a little bit windy though.
Well, I didn't see any frost hanging from your ears this time, so I thought maybe it warmed up a little bit. So.
As you can see, I'm not outside filming. I'm in the house filming.
You're in the big room. That's right.
With my virtual background here.
That's right. That's right. The big house.
That's right. So, Richard, let's see. Today, like I mentioned in the opener, we're going to have some headliners that we're going to talk about today and kind of look back with the forbearances, kind of where they were at and kind of where they are at kind of right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we haven't really seen much of a change, but at least we have some data that's in front of us and we can kind of get into that some more.
It's turning out to be a very interesting market.
It is. I believe the term is it's a seller's market right now.
It is. Yes, I think it is. We'll talk about that.
We will. Okay. For those of you that are watching right now, feel free to leave a comment. If you're on Facebook or on YouTube, we will grab that comment. We'll either talk about it live during the presentation part of the broadcast today, or we're kind of hold it until the end of the broadcast, and we'll do more of a Q&A and kind of a live banter with Richard and I back and forth. And if y'all have more questions, please keep the questions and comments coming. If you want to say hi and where you're from, we'd love for you to show us where you're at. So without further ado, let's get right into the broadcast, and it is sponsored by Brightpath Notes. All right, Mr. Richard.
Mm-hmm.
So this broadcast will not be possible without some sponsorship, and Brightpath Notes is one of our sponsorships, and we've got the note deals. So contact me, Justin, at brightpathnotes.com. If you're looking for performing loans, non-performing loans, first liens, residential, we got the secret sauce for you. We got the deals for you. So it's brightpathnotes.com/note-deals. And that's how you can find some of the deals we have on our website. Some of them are they need to be taken down, Richard. So I gotta crack the whip and get those deals down that aren't available anymore, and some new ones up there. So I will.
They all need to be taken down every once in a while.
They do. So our other sponsorship partner is Syria. It's a local real estate investing company. It stands for Central Indiana Real Estate Investor Association. And you can reach out to the executive director at syria.club if you're interested in joining the group. We have about 800 or so members in the group right now. And we have, fix and flippers, landlord people. We have note people. We have people that do the BRRRR strategy. We have a lot of wholesalers, a lot of great content as well. And so it's a great organization to be a part of. And if you invest in the Midwest area and you got some Indianapolis investments, hey, you might as well join the group, because then you got boots on the ground. All right. Our note investing training is called Constant Cash Flow. Richard and myself are two of the four investors that kind of put this together. So you can find out more information by emailing info@brightpathnotes.com, and we can get you the links and stuff for it. If you see our little ticker banner at the bottom, you can see the website that you can type into your address to Constant Cash Flow. And I believe we still have a phenomenal price of $97 for basically about 30 videos to learn from on the basics of notes, the fundamentals of notes. So if you've never bought a note before, if you bought a few notes, if you need a refresher in notes, this is a great course to get into.
We may only have a few copies left, though, right?
We may only have a few copies left. That's right.
That's right.
Self-directed IRAs. If you're looking to move your retirement account into a self-directed IRA, we highly recommend NewView Trust because, heck, they're our sponsor as well. So you can contact new accounts at newviewira.com. And if you mention this broadcast, they're going to waive your setup fee. How about that? All right, Syria, this is for you guys that are part of Syria right now. Don't forget to follow on Facebook. I always want to think that IN is Instagram, but it's LinkedIn. And then on their Instagram page, we got to work on them getting some smaller handles there. That's just too much. They have a very robust YouTube channel that's got a ton of videos on there. For those of you trying to get PHP credits in Syria, you want to take out your smartphone, pull out your camera, wave it over that QR code there. It'll take you right to the website. You put your first name, last name, and I believe your email address in there to get your PHP credits. I always forget what the PHP stands for. Someone tells me every time, and I still forget. So if you're not part of the Syria group, you can disregard that slide. All right, Mr. Richard. As you know, I have a podcast that I do, and it comes out on the bi-weekly. So it comes out every other week on the Wednesday. So today, Wednesday, Richard, your episode came out. Well, your second episode that you did with me. Mm-hmm. And you can go to Be the Bank podcast on any podcast directory, and you can find that. We want you to subscribe to it. We want you to give us some comments and some feedback. And we also record the video stream of it as well. We put on the Brightpath Notes YouTube channel for your entertainment.
I hear it's excellent.
I hear it's excellent. That's right. Only episode 2 and 3 that what you
right? especially.
All right, guys, if you have any comments, any questions throughout this broadcast, please don't be shy. Throw them out there on YouTube, Facebook, whatever social media platform you are watching this on, and we're happy to answer them. We may not answer them live because we might think, oh, hey, this is a good information to leave for our Q&A at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Richard, so Black Knight Financial Data, they come out with a mortgage report pretty much every month, and they have these beautiful charts, and they got these great reports, and they got all this data that comes through. And so we examine it and we look at it. We just kind of get a heartbeat as to where we're at with all this forbearance stuff. So, Richard, as you can see, the delinquency rate is continuing to go down, which is a good sign. And the foreclosure starts are starting to tick up, which means a lot of things that have been in trouble, a lot of loans that have been in trouble are finally starting to release and go to foreclosure. It does show that there's 4,000 active foreclosures, down 4,000, active foreclosures, which that doesn't really say a whole lot, as I think it's just a small blip in the radar for right now. But the good news is there's more foreclosures happening, which means the counties are opening and they're processing judicial stuff.
So do you remember, Justin, how many foreclosure starts there were last month?
You know, I don't.
Because it's hard to tell here whether the foreclosure starts are just because we're starting to hit a tsunami or a wave or whatever you want to call it, or just because the counties, as you said, are opening up and they're processing more. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Usually the stat on the slide that you see there, usually it tells you what the uptick was from the previous month. Mm-hmm. But I don't know it offhand. I guess I should have researched that a little bit more. So shame on me. If anybody knows that, throw it in the comment section, and we'll be glad to bring that data point up. So this is a chart that shows a delinquency rate ever since 2001. And you can see when it was a problem back in 2009. Obviously, is way up there, close to 11% delinquency rate as a national average. And now it's down to 3.38, which is extremely low. So that's a very positive sign. You can tell it's been going in the south direction for quite some time, for at least since the summer of 2020. Mm-hmm. So that's a good sign. We'll have 2 years coming up this summer. We'll probably have 2 years of a consistent drop and lower delinquency rate. All right, Richard. So this is the new mortgage defaults by year. This bar graph I thought was kind of interesting, so I wanted to throw this slide up there. It tracks from 2005 to 2021. You can see in 08, 09, and 2010 how there were a lot of defaults for the new mortgages for each of those years. And you look in 2020 when COVID happened, and we had all those forbearances. Obviously, you see a lot of defaults happening right there. And then 19 and 21, you see the bars about the same, right? So it would appear that there was obviously a problem in 2020, and then now it's kind of like it's not a problem this year, or more than likely 2022 will continue to go in a downward direction.
Right. So interesting that they're calling a forbearance a default, because we're splitting hairs there a little bit, but I thought they couldn't do that. Michael's got a good question I'm going to bring up here.
Sure.
Just because it's timely. How about if you take a stab at that?
Okay. Can you define what a foreclosure start is? So by definition, a foreclosure start is when the attorney sends the documentation or the letter to the borrower, and it will indicate, your lender has started this process. And that's when the clock is starting. So in some states, it'll be very quick. It could be a couple of months, depending on if they're backlogged or not, or if they're just a fast state like Texas or Missouri or sometimes Michigan. Or it could take a very long time. It could take a couple of years to get through it, like maybe in California or Florida, or sometimes in the East Coast states like New York and New Jersey. Sometimes it takes a very long time to go through it. But that's what they mean by foreclosure start. So the start of the foreclosure process is moving forward. So hopefully that helps, Michael. All right, Richard. So this graph, like I said, I thought it was kind of interesting to see, how many loan, 3.5 million, it looks like. Sorry, I have to look at my other monitor to see what the number is on 2020 for new mortgage defaults by year. And the low average on this chart seems to be around 1 million defaults by year of new mortgages.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, guys, this is only data for like conventional mortgages. This isn't like seller finance data that, mom and pop create or hedge funds create. This is new defaults for the conventional loans, like the FHA, the VA, the Fannie and Freddie, the big bank loans.
Right.
You gonna say something, Richard?
It's interesting that you would bring that up, because I don't know about your portfolio. What I've got, 100 plus that I'm keeping track of in mine and for other of my clients. And I don't have any defaults. I mean, I had one that I just resolved that was pre-COVID, where they were just playing a game.
Yeah.
But by and large, almost everybody I know is really hanging tight on the private mortgage side.
Yeah, it is interesting you say that. So I do recall one that was a problem before COVID, and that got resolved a few months back. And then we have one that had went non-performing, but they were kind of a pretty spotty payer before COVID happened to begin with. So I think I would say I had like one, maybe two. There might be another one I'm just not thinking of right now that we're helping manage through the process. But yeah, pretty overall, I agree with you, Richard. The private mortgage business, it seemed to not be affected too much by COVID and the forbearances.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that since a lot of the borrowers are non-W-2 borrowers, and for lack of a better word, what you'd call sort of less stable, although that's not the case in a lot of instances. There are people who work for the post office and places like that. But you would think that the default rate would be higher, but it's not. And I just find that a very interesting factor.
It seems like, Richard, there's upper class, there's middle class and lower class, just to kind of generalize people by their income. And it seemed like the lower and the middle class weren't affected as much as maybe like the upper middle class or the middle class. It seems like there was a band in there of people that it affected the most. And it seemed like the lower class or the lower income generators of people, let's just say that are, I don't know, Richard, let's just say, 40, 50,000 a year and under as a household income. It seemed like they were able to find jobs a little bit easier, or they had more government assistance coming in. So that's what I think led to a lot of those types of borrowers, or those at those income levels didn't struggle as much as people actually a little bit higher income, because it wouldn't take much effort for somebody to lay off an $80,000 to $100,000 employee if they needed to.
No, and I'm just thinking, out here in California, I know a lot of people in my network groups who are restaurant owners and professionals.
Yeah.
One of the fellows that I know is a cosmetic surgeon, and he was used to making $1.5 million, $2 million a year. And he said in the first part of COVID, he only got 10% of his income because he couldn't practice anymore because it was non-essential.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge hit, even for somebody who's used to making that kind of money. You can say, well, they probably got reserves. Maybe. Or
maybe you would think
maybe they've spent it.
Yeah.
So it's
how expensive it is to maintain a Ferrari.
Yeah. Darn, I've got to give up the Ferrari, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it's tough to say that without having real stuff in front of us, Richard.
Right.
But that was an interesting slide. Some headlines here, Richard. So DS News had a few articles out that I thought were kind of interesting. I did kind of peruse some of these articles. I didn't read them in full detail, but I thought the headlines were kind of catchy and kind of fun for us to talk about a little bit. And one of them said, servicers going digital with e-modifications. This is Tim Anderson, president of eMortgage Division. So what, excuse me. So what does this mean? Well, this means the loss mitigation or the loan modification process for a borrower now doesn't have to be like hand delivered in the mail or have to be delivered to them and then they go find a notary to sit in front of or read through the documents or to contact the servicer and figure out the details of this loan modification and stuff. So it looks like everything can be done kind of digitally, and it looks like they're using the RON, I always say RON, RON, the remote online notary process, to where notary can be on a video call like we're on now, like you guys are watching us on YouTube. And then we are also watching you on the screen with your camera, signing the documentation, physically signing it in front of them. And that way they can document, yes, I verify who you are. And it's all a process that's going to be turning in that direction. So are you surprised, Richard?
I think you just like to throw around big acronyms. That's why you say RON.
Yeah, RON.
It makes you feel really good. No, I'm not surprised. Michael's got a question here, though. Let's before. No, I'm sorry.
We answered that one.
We did that one. Are these new mortgages or mortgages in general? We're going back to the last topic.
Okay, so they would, if you're talking about the bar graph, Michael, I'll talk about this a couple different ways. The bar graph was showing just new mortgages. So that means newly originated mortgages in that year, if they were going to default or not. That's what that means. So remember, the Black Knight financial data that we look at doesn't take into consideration the seller finance data that Richard and I mainly invest in. These are what we call conventional mortgages. So there's by FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, VA loans, the big banks, when they create loans, the conventional mortgages, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Hopefully that answers that.
We have one other question.
Sure.
But I'm going to have to ask the person who posted it to ask it in English. Because we're not speaking foreign languages right now. So go ahead. Let's talk a little bit more about eMortgage. I didn't want to jump in the middle there.
No problem. But basically, that's what the servicers are going digital for. I'm not surprised by this. I kind of wish it would happen sooner. I think COVID kind of escalated everybody understanding that, you don't have to be physically in front of a notary. It is a process that is time consuming. You have to find one. You have to pay for one. You have to drive to one. Like the whole process of using a notary and physically being in front of you, it is a process to it.
Right.
The remote online notary system is great. We use like notarize.com. It's a real easy website to remember. I use that all the time when I'm able to notarize documents. I always check with the county or with somebody before I record a document that's kind of outside the mortgage world. Like let's say a special contract or some sort of, I don't know. I can't think of some of the terminology I've used for contracts, like, hypothecation agreements and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask first, hey, will you accept an online notary stamp when I record this? And more than likely they are okay with it. There are some counties, probably more in the rural areas, that don't either like that step or they want to physically see that wet ink signature and that wet stamp on those documents and physically have the original. So it's up to the county what they accept or not, but it seems like more and more counties are accepting the the electronic version of the notary.
Yeah, and I think as we may have said on an earlier broadcast, some counties even require that things are recorded in hand or in person. To this extent, if we're just doing assignments or something like that, maybe we don't have to do that. But it's interesting. I've got to think that eventually those counties are going to come around because it's easier for them also.
Yeah, and those counties are probably the ones that don't actually scan in and archive digitally their documents anyway. So you'd have to go in and manually sift through their document books to find the recorded documents and research that stuff. So there are a few counties like that are behind. You're not going to run into them very often. Like I said, they're probably in more rural areas of the states, not in large cities. The large city ones, I mean, they had no choice. They had to go digital as soon as they could because it just made their life a heck of a lot easier. Mm-hmm. And made it easier for us to research for title purposes.
Right.
Okay, the true cost of fraud. So this is another DS News article. I'll just kind of read this little blurb out here for everyone. According to the survey, the cost of fraud for U.S. financial services and lending firms has increased between 6.7 and 9.9% compared with before the pandemic. To put this another way, for every dollar in fraud in 2021, lenders spend $4 to recover it, compared to $364 in 2020 and $325 in 2019. So that is pretty significant. You spend it, if you have $1 in fraud, you spend $4 recovering from it. That's a pretty expensive.
It's very expensive, and at some point you have to determine if you just shouldn't let it go and pay it yourself. But that gets expensive too.
Yeah. So the true cost of fraud. So you have all heard about mortgage fraud and predatory lending, stuff like that. If you haven't heard that, it's just, if you look it up, you're going to find out some things. So there are some bad eggs out there. Yes, there are, even in the note space. And there are some bad lenders out there, and they see opportunities to make money the easy way. And that's the kind of avenue they go down. There are people that, have bought houses and situations for a few $1,000s. They barely put money into it to make it secure, safe, and sound, and they resell it for like $40,000 in seller financing. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right.
Those types of things, they don't add up. It doesn't make sense. Nowadays, we're trying to make sure that we're doing things the right way with borrowers. We're having to disclose all the information through a title company and disclosure statements, and underwriting them with a professional underwriter. So you can have that file. So if you do go to foreclosure, you can show a judge, be like, look, I gave this borrower every opportunity. I checked their debt to income. Everything said they could afford to make this repayment. They were fully disclosed and aware of the interest rate and how much interest they're paying. And so you really want to do things the right way. Now, is there a chance that you would get caught doing anything? Not that you would do something wrong, but for someone to come back and kind of nail you for something, the chance is low, but you still want to get in the habit of doing things the right way, because it really doesn't cost you that much money up front to kind of go through all those due diligence steps and close with a title company and get the proper title insurance and loan policies and stuff. But as you can see, right, the cost of fraud is, 4x on that dollar you spend.
And you just can't let your guard down. Somebody who you and I both know, who is very, what I would say, senior in the note business, actually almost sent out a check to a title company for $150,000 because a fraudster had substituted just one digit in the ABA number, and that meant that it was going to go to a completely different bank. Actually, her secretary was going to send it out, and she just by a fluke put up the two different notices and said, wait a minute, we've got a different number here. And this was like 5 minutes before the wire was supposed to go out. So you really have to be careful.
Yeah, there's internally here, Richard, we have a lot of checks and balances when it comes to wires. It's absolutely crucial that everything is basically triple checked before it goes out. We do an online process with our wires, with our bank. And then we actually have our bank call us to re-verify that information. And they require us to regurgitate, exactly how much money is going out and where is it going to. And, they verify, the routing number, that the bank that it's going to. So everything, kind of happens as safely and protected with a good process as you can. So, knock on wood, we haven't sent anything the wrong way. We have had somebody send us money and send it to the wrong place. Luckily, banks are pretty good about that. They understand, there are some blips and people are human, they make mistakes, and they can reroute money, because more than likely you won't get the correct account number if you mess up, because account numbers are so, spaced out so far in the numbering system. That's more than likely you won't hit somebody's account by accident, but it is possible.
Sure.
Or even the wrong bank. So more than likely it's like an error when the wire goes out, but I'm sure it happens a lot more than we realize. But man, I don't want to be one of those statistics or those numbers. So I triple check everything before it goes out. And I'm actually the one that does the wiring for all of our transactions.
So when you got those funds that were mistakenly sent to you, was that how you funded the Justin Bogard Children's College Fund?
That's true.
Ah, okay.
It's a trust, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Enough of that noise. Okay. This article is from Realtor.com. Limited inventory creating housing market challenges. I think we're all aware that we're in the seller's market. I think we've been in the seller's market since 2013. Really, it seems like it's been very bullish for a long time. Everyone's saying it's on a bubble. Everyone's saying there's going to be a crash. Everyone's saying there's going to be a correction. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people are saying that. We don't know, but this was interesting that it is perceived. And Richard, I'll let you kind of read through this out loud, just to save me from talking more. But it looks like it's not going to correct itself anytime soon.
No, they seem to be saying that. And I think you and I mentioned earlier in the day, just a little bit, this is all anecdotal, but in light of a lot of forecasters saying that millennials really want to be renters and the rental market is soaring, it's interesting to me that there'd be a housing shortage too, because those millennials would be likely buying a lot of these houses, a lot of starter homes and things like that. So what is creating this shortage? I'm not exactly sure.
Well, could it be people don't want to sell? Could it be they have so much tappable equity that they say, I don't want to move. I like where I'm at, but I do like the fact that my house has appreciated another $35,000 in 2 years. So I'm going to refinance, get a lower interest rate. I'm going to pull that money back out and I'm going to put it to use elsewhere or pay off some other debt and stuff like that. So
that's a very good factor. I hadn't thought about that. You're right.
But I'm sure there's other factors too. That's just what comes to mind first. Is I don't think people really want to sell. They do realize it's a seller market, but if they have nowhere else to go, then it doesn't behoove them to do that, right?
Right. Right. Very true.
If they're like what I aspire to be, a full-time camper, then you can sell your real estate and then you can go buy a camper and then you can be a full-time camper, right?
That's right. You're not alone in that pursuit. I was down at my local coffee Starbucks type place. It wasn't a Starbucks, but I bumped into an entire family that was there, and actually they were from Ohio, and they'd been traveling the entire pandemic, and the kids were in school virtually, and they were seeing the U.S. And I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, if I would have thought about that earlier in the pandemic, I would have made that happen, because I think that would have been really cool to do that. That would have been a neat experience, because if the kids can learn virtually, that's great. Or maybe it would have been the sword that I fell on, because maybe it would drive me nuts to be with the kids 24/7 and then trying to do school and work at the same time. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad thought, Richard. I probably shouldn't have brought that into my mind.
Yeah.
All right. So it says we're forecasting a whirlwind year ahead of buyers. And if January housing trends are any indication, 2022 competition is already heating up. I've heard this from other people as well, Richard, that other people that I'm Facebook friends with that are real estate agents that I kind of respect and value their opinion. And they definitely see that. They said, you ain't seen nothing yet until the 2022 buying frenzy is going to happen. And I believe them. I think in March, probably early March, maybe to mid-March, we're going to start to see the numbers pick up a lot more as far as, I won't say days on market. I want to say like bidding offers and multiple offers. I think we're going to see that and I think we're gonna see it even worse than we did in 2021. So it is going to be an even stronger seller's market is what I'm seeing. Now, this is, of course, me locally in the area that I live in and that I see in front of me, and also some of the major markets as well. There are probably going to be some markets that are going to be down like there is in any economic time, Richard, but I don't know of any off the top of my head. That's a big city that might not be too successful, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting to look back when we're in the July to August timeframe to see what's happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I just made a note here for maybe one of our next broadcasts. I'll actually do some data analysis and find out what the heck's going on, because that is interesting to me. Lisa says she agrees. It's nuts so far this year.
Yeah. It's probably not going to change too much. It's funny to think the market that we're in and how real estate has appreciated. It's been very consistent with appreciating in big numbers year over year. And it really hasn't changed that much. Richard, it could end up being to where maybe we slowly taper back to something more modest, like a 5% appreciation growth every year as an average, but there may not be a big dip backwards. It may just be, this is the new normal.
Could be. One of the things out here, then I may have said this in previous broadcasts, that's driving it is both tech money and crypto money. I mean, we've got a lot of multimillionaires out here now that are 40 years old, and they can afford to buy bigger houses and things like that, and they just can't find them.
Yeah. We're running out of money. We just print more money. We run out of housing. We can't print more houses, right?
Right.
You can't just make it magically.
A lot of the smaller houses here in the Bay Area are going for $1,000 a square foot. So, and more.
Wow.
And I'll let you do the math in your local neighborhood as to what that would cost you for a house.
It's 10x.
Yeah.
The average square foot around, the Midwest, or let's just say the Indianapolis area, is around $100. It can be anywhere from 90 to 125, but we'll just say 100 just for round number's sake. Mm-hmm. So 100 versus 1,000. I mean, that's incredible. That is incredible.
And I'm not talking. Some people say, "Oh, gee, those numbers must be for 800 square foot houses." Mm-hmm. No, those numbers are for 3,000 square foot houses. So,
incredible.
It's expensive.
It's expensive. That's right. It's expensive. Okay. I wanted to get to a case study.
Okay.
And the case study for today, we just have one, but we're going to kind of explore it. It was a person that came to me and says, I have a rental for sale. And they asked me if I buy rentals. I said, no, I don't buy rentals. And they said, well, do you know anybody that buys rentals? I was like, yeah, of course I know people that buy rentals, but tell me what you got. Let me hear your story. Let's see what's going on. And so the question is, what do you do when a landlord wants to sell you their rental? And so for me, I was just asking some basic questions. I had kind of 3 questions in mind at first. I said, how much do you want for it? And they would say, blah, blah, blah. This is what I want to get out of it. And I said, okay, does the tenant pay well? And the answer would be, yes, absolutely. They pay on time. I can prove it. They've been a consistent payer. They've been paying for quite a few years. Okay, great. Would they like to own this home? And so the answer is, you know what? They have mentioned that they want to stay here long term, and they're really interested. They do want to buy it, actually. I'm like, okay, great. So now I'm picturing in my head, okay, maybe there is a way for me to get involved with this without being the landlord. And so I got to thinking about it, and I ran some numbers as far as the value on the house and was trying to figure out how to make this work. And you know what? Lo and behold, I said, why don't you sell it to the tenant with seller financing? And then I, in return, will buy that mortgage from you the same day that you're closing on it. And then you'll still get the money that you want. And then I'll get what I want out of it, which is really a mortgage to begin with. And so that's kind of how the conversation started, and the numbers kind of aligned, and the borrower was definitely on board and stuff. So I had a note mortgage created, and I purchased it via an allonge, and an AOM stands for assignment of mortgage.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, when you do something like that, how do you handle the difference between what his mortgage amount is and what you buy it at? Why is he willing to take a discount?
Well, that that's where the conversation got interesting. So this particular seller was very motivated to get a certain amount of money so that they could go from having this rental to putting that money into actually a new build that they were doing. And so the timing of it had to happen pretty quick, within, let's just say, about 4 weeks. So I kind of had some moving parts in front of me, and I had this deal in front of me. I was figuring out, okay, they want this amount of money here. This is a fixed number. So how do I get them this money and then me have something in return from it that is, a yield that I'm looking for and a risk that I'm looking for as well, with all these opportunities. And so that's how I was able to kind of mastermind this deal here. So their sticking point was, Justin, I need this much money. And that's it. And I said, you know what? I can get you that much money, but this is what I have to do in order to do it. And they were totally on board.
So there's something that I ran across this last week that you and I haven't discussed that's sort of along that same line. And anybody who's doing what you're discussing here can sort of use this tactic. They had granted a seller carryback mortgage, and it was at 0% interest. And I questioned him. I said, well, why would you do that? I'm just curious, because I'm thinking, well, look, you're losing money. You're not making money. And B, you're actually losing money due to inflation. And the response really surprised me. And they said, well, we marked up the price so much that we actually figured that we're getting a 10% return on the amount that we wanted. And I thought, holy smokes, that never had even occurred to me. And you've got sort of the same situation here.
Yeah. So the exact scenario you talked about with owner financing, I have run into that before with a seller, and I was dumbfounded too. I'm just thinking like, okay, this property is worth, I don't know, let's just say $80,000, and they chose to sell it for $115,000 at 0%, thinking like, oh, I'm just getting principal back, so I don't have to pay taxes on the interest and stuff. So I'm not going to get into the taxes of it and talk about that, but it just seems kind of wonky to me why you would even do that. So in those situations, it's a 0% interest rate loan. That means if you bought it for par, you wouldn't be really making any money. But if you bought it for what he should have done the loan for, you really still have a very risky deal, because if the property is only worth $80,000 and you buy it for $80,000, even though the borrower owes $115,000, you're still putting yourself at a lot of risk right there to have a problem if you have to turn it back over, because you don't have a lot of protection there. So it's an interesting way logically to think about it if you're the seller, to create a note like that,
right?
Which I applaud them for trying to thinking outside the box, but it just doesn't make sense, because if they had to turn their property over and they already had 70 or 80,000 into it, it just doesn't make sense. The math, it doesn't work in their favor when things go wrong. So if they want to take that chance, hey, more hats off to them. But yeah, Richard, I understand what you're saying. I was kind of dumbfounded too, and be like, you're overcharging for the property,
right?
Because technically, if a buyer and seller agree to a price, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks the value is. They agree to the price, and that's what you sell it for.
Right. I mean, they had a number that they were satisfied with, and anything in excess of that was gravy as far as they were concerned. So they didn't really see themselves as taking on additional risk.
So if you guys have any questions or any comments about this, please don't be afraid to chime in on the YouTube or Facebook, whatever you're watching right now, and ask those questions. We can bring them up right now. We might wait till the end if it's a question that doesn't pertain to exactly what we're talking about right at this point. We're still happy to answer at the end any question that you got at all about note investing, or what's the latest fashion trends that Richard can answer for you as well.
That's right.
So I'm having trouble with my PowerPoint here. Just a second. All right. Cool. So I went through a title company because I wanted the seller, the landlord, to convey proper warranty deed title to the buyer. So then they would, have the taxes transferred over, and they would prorate all that stuff. They would get a full owner's title policy, an Ulta policy. They'd also get a loan policy or a lender's policy as well. I drafted up the note and mortgage with our attorney, and so they used that. And so they were the lender. the tenant was the borrower in that deal. And then I created the allonge and the assignment of mortgage so that I could purchase that at the same time. And we did this all through a title company. So we made sure the borrower knew that, you're going to escrow for taxes and insurance now. And we were disclosed about how much that was for them. They went out and got an insurance policy, and then we were going to pay for it through the closing. We boarded it with a servicer as soon as we closed on it. And we had the borrower set up ACH payments so they can have the draft come right out of their checking account to make those payments, so they wouldn't have to remember to make those payments. And so we did all that whole package right there. We got it all under control at the title company, and the notaries actually we did this virtually. Speaking of Ron, we did this all virtual. Well, I'm sorry, not all virtually. So the sellers of the property, they're from another state. So they had an online notary actually. I'm sorry, it wasn't an online notary. It was actually a in-person notary, what they call a mobile notary, went to them to sign the documents. And then the borrower actually went to the local title company to actually sign the documents there. So sorry, I got ahead of myself. I thought it was a Ron. It wasn't a Ron.
Okay.
So now, Richard, we have a highly marketable loan. The borrowers are on the deed. They're not renters anymore, which is great news for them. So they have a note and mortgage, a lien against the property. They're doing ACH payments, and there's a full escrow. And so everything is nice and neat and under control. And so that's kind of how I set up the deal.
Sounds good to me. Sounds very solid.
So let's talk about the numbers. So this was actually a $90,000 unpaid balance. So the borrower was able to bring $5,000 down for a down payment. They had a very long history of rental seasoning that I looked into and vetted. So I was very comfortable with them having some sort of a smaller down payment because quite honestly, they were renting and they were putting a lot of money down through their rents throughout the last 2 or 3 years they've been renting. I was happy with that. The interest rate had to be about 8.5% because it was a 360-month mortgage. So the payment was going to be $692 for principal and interest. And so we have this type of loan already for sale for $75,000.
Fantastic. And that was enough to satisfy the seller.
So this was me selling the asset. So I own it now. So the seller had a number in mind, and we got actually a little bit above that. We gave them a little bit extra than what they asked for to make, I'm here to make people happy, Richard.
Okay? Sure. That's right.
I'm not in to make money. I just want people to be happy.
Okay.
So they got what they wanted. And now I have this asset that I kind of created, or I harvest, if you will. And now I'm able to deploy it and then sell it for around $75,000. So very strong asset. The redeeming factors to this, Richard, are pretty simple. I don't know why the bullet points didn't show up here. I kind of messed up. Sorry. The home value is easily over $115K. It's on a note and mortgage. The prior rents were extremely seasoned, so that's why I know it's a really strong note. They pay on ACH. It's already set up for it, and the escrow for taxes and insurance, and everything is compliant there. So, changing 500.
Sounds good to me.
Right. That's what we did. You got any questions about that? Go ahead and pop those up now. Be happy to walk through something if I went too fast or too slow.
So let's see what Lisa says. She says, so you own the note and then sold it to a larger mortgage company. If you sold it for $75K, how much profit?
So I haven't sold it yet. So what I meant to say was I'm going to sell the asset for $75K. So I'm offering it for sale now because this all kind of happened recently with this deal. And so now that I have the deal finished and finalized, we're offering it for sale. So that's what I meant for that. So yeah, we have obviously less than 75 into the deal. And so we're offering it for sale for 75. So we give the next person in line a pretty low risk deal as far as, protection from the home value is 115 and they're getting in about 75K. And so the rate or the yield is probably going to be, 9 or 10% right there.
All right. And so did you sell it to a larger mortgage company? I
haven't sold it. That's the factor that is probably confusing.
You be selling it to a larger mortgage company?
I am offering it for sale for 75 to, people that are looking for inventory. That's what I'm going to start offering it for. So I don't have an official marketing flyer for this one yet. I'm just saying I'm going to offer it for sale for about 75,000 right now.
The people who are watching this are probably going to be a little bit surprised is what I'm going to say but I just was approached, Justin, by 2 different note buyers today that I had forgot to mention to you, and we'll talk about it after the broadcast because this would be a perfect one for them to buy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, it's funny because as soon as we get these assets like this that we buy on seller financing, we have people lined up ready to buy them pretty quickly because inventory is not as plentiful as it used to be a few years ago. So, but these are things that we want to set up the right way. We want to make them strong and secure, so someone getting into them is not going to have a problem. And if they do, they got a heck of an asset, and they got it at a pretty low risk cost. So.
Right. So they're probably going to want you to collect at least 1 month, maybe 2 months of debt service on it. But after that, they'll be ready to go.
This is what I love about note investing, because if it doesn't sell, I'm still collecting the cash flow. I mean,
right.
you realize I have a 360-month note in front of me, and the amortization on those first couple payments are mostly interest. So I'm happy if it sits for a while. It doesn't bother me.
So based on that, and what we both know, the first 5, let's say you hold this for 5 years and then sell it. What do you think your yield would be, just ballpark, on owning it for that first 5 years?
Well, the yield will be different if it paid off. So let's talk about if it paid off early. The yield will just be phenomenal, because I would make all that interest and barely any principal would tick down over 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And then the borrower would have to pay me off because they would get a refinance. They'd pay me off 100% of what the UPB is. So let's say they owe 90 today, and in 5 years it goes down, let's say like $2,000 of principal. So they still owe me $88,000 on top of the $692 that I collected for 60 months. I mean, you can imagine the math there. It's pretty phenomenal. So the return on investment is pretty significant versus what we have into it. So I don't know exactly what we have into it. I'm probably going to say it's somewhere around 70,000, maybe a little bit less into the deal right now, just to be fully disclosed about what we have into it.
Right. But just so people can follow this, what Justin just said is exactly why banks created amortization.
Yeah.
Because they are counting on the fact that most people refi or pay off their loans in the first 7 to 10 years. So they may be charging you 3% or 4%, but they're probably making 8 or 9 or 10% when you look at the actual holding period of the note.
Yeah, the national average since I've been in the note business has been about 7 to 9 years. Now it's ticking down more to 7 to 5 years, as we're seeing, just because the refinances are just coming through in groves here, it seems like. Right. So you're not holding a mortgage for 30 years. It's the happy payoff dance, right? When you get the borrower to refi or they sell the house. I mean, it's a great thing. The time value of money theory is always going to be in your favor. The worst scenario for me is I hold this for 30 years. Okay.
Right.
I make a lot of interest on it, right? Right. The best scenario is for them to refi or sell this house very quickly within a couple of years. Or I can sell it to someone else that wants to make the passive income, and then I can move on to the next one, because that's what I'm in the business of doing. I'm harvesting loans, creating them, and then reselling them to other people, or I'm just keeping them in certain accounts for us.
That's right. Good deal. Okay. So let's see. Lisa says, such a great strategy. Yes.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate your comments too. Keep them coming.
Right. And so Michael says, is this home in a self-directed IRA?
So the way that's worded, Michael, maybe I'm not catching on to it. So the home itself is not in a self-directed IRA. I did not use my self-directed IRA to purchase this one. The sellers, carried back a note and mortgage, so they didn't have it in a self-directed IRA either. It was just in their personal names, husband and wife, actually. And so, if that answers your question, if that didn't, Michael, chime back in, and maybe I'm just not understanding. But I did not use self-directed IRA money to fund this deal.
Right. So you could have used your self-directed IRA monies to buy this.
Yeah, I could have. And anyone, if they want to buy it, they can use their self-directed IRA to buy it.
Right. And whoever you sell it to could use their self-directed IRA monies to buy the note. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. What else do we have?
So that is the end of that little case study there. So that's kind of story of what was presented to me and how I figured out how to make it work. So number one, I didn't want a rental. I could have just said, nope, rentals aren't for me. I'm not interested. But I got curious and I asked questions, and my questions were getting answered in a way that said, hey, there's something here. And so the stars align. Is it going to work for every deal, Richard? Absolutely not. It's going to work for some of these deals. And I'm willing to walk down, to take a walk with them through this journey to figure out, is this going to make sense to be for seller financing? And this one just happened to be it.
So actually, you bring up a good point for a lot of note investors, I think, here. And that is that if you're buying something like this, or you're trying to create something, unless they're presenting a very cut and dried case and things work very well, it really behooves you to find out what all the facts are. Because as you and I found out on a deal earlier today that we were trying to buy, the woman had a very convoluted set of reasonings in terms of paying off other loans and buying other houses and things like this to want to do the deal. And it wasn't until we still completely understood what she was trying to accomplish that we could come up with 2 or 3 or 4 ways for her to solve her problem. And it's if you're somebody who likes puzzles, like Justin and I both do, it's a great occupation.
Yeah, you're right. So they have a problem, and you're trying to solve that problem. Right. So if you just focus on solving the problem, the rest of it's just like, look, I can get you what you want, but you got to work with me on these other things. And so the seller at the beginning said, Justin, I need this much money and I need it as quick as you can. Can you make it happen? And so that's kind of what they did. So they realized that, could they have sold the borrower on that note and mortgage and just kept the note and mortgage? Yeah, they could have, but they weren't going to do that because they needed the money to go put towards their house that they're building, right? A down payment towards their house that they're building. So that wasn't the case. Could they have sold it through the traditional MLS and maybe made a little bit more money? Yeah, they could have, but are a lot of people looking for rentals right now? So is the market harder to find? Are there more people out there buying rentals than there are homeowners trying to buy homes for themselves? So that was the other quandary that they had. So they knew that they weren't going down the traditional path to get money out of it. So they knew what I did, and they said, would you want to buy this rental? We just need this much out of it. So
great. What else?
All right. So I think we are at the end here. So just so you guys know, as we kept on talking about it, we find these deals, all the time. Right. So we look and buy these deals ourselves. So Richard and I, we do buy first liens, whether the land contracts, contract for deeds, note and mortgages, note and deeded trust, lease options, all those things, we buy them. So take your smartphone out if you have a deal, and you can pull your camera out and then wave it over this QR code here. It'll take you to our webpage that you can enter in all this data or this form. And then it'll kind of give us this quote submission, and then it'll get to us and we can review it and look it over and give you a price on it. So whether you want to broker a note to us, meaning you find this deal, you can't fund it yourself, or you don't know how to work your way through it, work with Richard and I, we'd love to buy that or kind of show you the ropes, and we could be the funding partner for that deal. And then you can make a small commission on that as well, as we love that. So just use that quote submission there. And then lastly, Richard, we're going to talk about next month, March 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. We will be live on YouTube again, and the Facebook page and our Facebook group. And follow Brightpath Notes on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And you got my email, justin@brightpathnotes.com. You got Richard at amnotecap.com. That's Richard's email. And our Facebook group is Be the Bank Real Estate Note Investing. You can see our little logo in the background. That's how you know to get the Facebook group. If you want to get invited in there, we do our live streaming to there as well. If you have questions and stuff in between the broadcast that we have that you want us to answer during the broadcast, or we have 3 or 4 moderators on the Facebook page as well that can help you answer some of your questions if you're looking for deals, or if you have questions about a deal that you're searching right now or doing due diligence on. That's a great place for it as well.
That'll be our last broadcast before we start daylight savings time.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Well, maybe not for everybody. There might be somebody on this call that's stuck in, is it Arizona? There's some spot in Arizona.
I think so, yeah.
The whole state of Arizona that doesn't really change. Indiana used to be that way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, for a long time. And so when they switched over, it was weird to me. I was like, so we have to move our clock forward and then we have to move it backwards. So, but that is the end of our presentation part of our broadcast. And we want you guys to stay tuned. And if you have more comments and questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box there if you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, and we will definitely answer them. And if you give Richard and I just a few seconds, we will be back and we'll be able to have a more Q&A here at the end. So we'll see you guys in just a minute.
Join us for party time.
It's day after party, baby.
That's right.
All right, Richard. So Lisa here asked a good question. So it says, interesting. How long does it take to sell notes generally? So that's a good question. It really depends on how hungry your buyers are and how many buyers you have. You have institutional buyers who are, bigger banks or bigger hedge funds that can have that they have the ability to write that 6-7 figure check if they need to buy a deal. And then you have private investors like myself and Richard will throw ourselves in that category to where we can buy a few deals at a time, not like a big bank or hedge fund, but we can buy a few at a time. So it depends on our appetite of what we're looking for and if you have the right inventory for us. So with Brightpath Notes, I know our buyers about what they're looking for, about what safety risk they're looking for, about what return they're looking for. So I kind of get deals that fit that category. So I'm able to sell them a lot quicker. But I've sold deals within the next day after I bought loans, and I've held on to deals for more than a year too before I've sold them as well. So it kind of depends on what you want to do with that loan, Lisa. So if you want to buy it and hold it for a little bit, that's okay. And then you can offer it for sale. The selling process in general, Richard, you chime in as well. I say it takes about 2 to 6 weeks for the selling closing cycle, because it's all dependent on if you have all the information in front of you and if you need to go and get attorney help or get special title work done or to fix any liens.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I've had a number of, since I've got clients who deal with me all the time, and they just say, look, I got 50,000, go out and, buy me a note. They don't even want to look at it. I mean, I do what I call a simultaneous close with them. So I've got the escrow agent both doing the purchase for me and the sale to them all at once. So I'm literally holding it for seconds, if at all. But that being said, I always assume that everything that I buy, whether I'm brokering it or not, is going to be held in my portfolio. And the reason for that is because a lot of times it is. Everybody's got different criteria for buying their notes. One of my buyers is very risk averse, and he says, look, I want a note in Indiana, I want another one in Ohio, I want another one in Kansas. He wants to be spread all around because he doesn't want the risk of tornadoes and things like that. Another one of my borrowers says, well, I really want something that I can drive to because he and his wife like to hop in the car on Saturday morning and see all the houses they've got notes in, and they make a day of it. They have lunch. So it really depends. Now, the latter person I spoke about there has bought notes from me that I've had in my portfolio for 2 years. But as you have said earlier, I'm very happy to hold those because I'm making a pretty good yield on them. So fine by me.
Right. So if the worst case scenario, you hold a note and you're just making a pretty solid return on it for a long time, that's not a bad scenario. So running a note business, obviously Richard and I both do that. We do have to consider when we want to accelerate and get things off of our books if we need to, whether we're having debt to get that inventory or whether we're using our own money, and there's different opportunities for it. So there's different reasons why someone in the business of buying and selling loans often and using velocity would want to sell the loan. And there's reasons why people that are just professional investors that just want to make passive income, why they just want to buy them and hold them for a long time.
Right, right.
So, yeah, Lisa, great stuff. Thank you very much for saying that. We appreciate your comments. Anybody else have any comments or suggestions or questions they want to ask us now? That now is a great time. Otherwise, Richard and I will kind of talk for a little bit, and then we may end it early.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm just looking down the comments here. It looks like we have answered just about everything that has come in. I'm trying to think of what seems to be relevant at this time. I think we've talked about it a little bit, that the non-performing note tsunami doesn't seem to be a tsunami yet. Based on the foreclosure rate that we had, foreclosure starts, it looks like that might be happening. But since interest rates are lower, it's not like it was last time where people didn't have much equity and interest rates were high. I've actually found some people in my portfolio who are refinancing out into conventional loans because they can. The rates are down and they've got a lot of equity, and yahoo, why not?
Yeah, that's the key word, equity there. So the housing appreciation has helped that so much to where borrowers look a lot different now today than they did about 3 years ago when their LTV, their loan to value, was a lot different. So if the value of the home was closer to what they owed, they're considered a little bit more risky for a bank. So they're not as happy to lend on that. But now if there's a stretch to where now maybe they're only 70% loan to value or 65% loan to value, well, then there's quite a big cushion in there for a bank. So they're like, okay, yeah, you got some equity in here. This is great. We don't have a problem lending on it now. So I tell you what, a low risk deal for me, being brand new, was $100,000 home to where the borrower put $50,000 down and then carrying back a $50,000 mortgage. And I bought it with like 1 month seasoning because then again, the borrower showed, okay, I've got a lot of skin in the game. So this is a pretty good deal. Then again, if the borrower was refinancing and they had, $100,000 valued home and they owe $50,000 debt, well, that looks like a lot. That looks very less risky to me than it does if the loan was a $50,000 balance and the house was a $65,000 value, right?
Right. Very much so. I'm just trying to think of what other trends are going out there or what else we're seeing. The structured finance market seems to be roaring along right now. I'm not doing any of them myself, but I just offer that as a anecdotal comment.
Structured finance is pretty fun. So that's kind of like the deal that I was showing as a case study. It's like you said, Richard, you said it best. It's a puzzle. So if you like puzzles or if you like solving a problem, this is great. There's always a unique way. Like Richard mentioned before about how him and I are trying to buy a lot more seller finance paper, and we're talking with a lot of mom and pop sellers, and he comes up with some funny situations, and there are people out there that say, I'm looking to get this much money out of my loan. And then Richard and I try to run the numbers to figure out, how do we solve that problem? How do we get them that number a little bit more so that they're happy? And then also in turn, how does it make our portfolio look, or what can we do with that? Or do we have a buyer for that? Like Richard mentioned, he has a couple of buyers for a note that I'm offering for sale pretty soon. So it's knowing your customer, right? Knowing your buyer of what they want to get. And that's the type of inventory that you go after if you're going to broker notes.
Right. So Lisa is saying, how do you recommend someone get started in the note biz?
Well, firstly, so you gotta go to Constant Cash Flow, right? And download the course and get your kind of foundation set. That would be the first place I would start.
Right.
If you don't want to do the Constant Cash Flow course, there are other courses out there. There's other people that, we could recommend offline if you want and have a conversation, just kind of explain to you what their course would be more geared towards. Our course kind of covers everything as far as giving you a little bit of taste of what different notes you can buy. Some people just offer specific training for non-performing or specific training for seconds. or just seller financing, or, buying, conventional mortgages and stuff. Like, it's all fine. It kind of depends on what you want to do. If you don't know what you want to do, it's best to start off with something that's more, rounded.
So I've actually launched several people's note careers by selling them a partial. And they've said to me up front, gee, I'd like to get started. How do I get started? I said, well, buy a partial from me. I'll be glad to walk you through the mechanics. You can start to see how all this works, what all the players' parts are, who all the players are. And it's a great education. And you can get in for a relatively small amount. And then based on that, I think one of the toughest things is you can get the knowledge, but one of the most difficult things is then how do you walk and talk that to investors? And so until you do a deal yourself, AKA a partial or something like that, it's very difficult for you to say, oh, well, the process works like this and whatever that is. So that's actually, I can think of 3 different people that I've helped launch their careers that way. And I know Justin or I would be more than happy to help you do that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Richard. So that's something I haven't brought up too often, but you're right. It's like you go to college and you get your degree in whatever it is. We'll just say bowling lane management. And, that's great that you learn the principles of it or the theory behind it. But until you actually go to a job, right, and actually experience it, it's a whole totally different thing. So yeah, it's great to have the knowledge, and you do need it, but you also need to get your hands dirty, and you have to walk through the process. Because I tell you what, note investing is interesting. You can be a very experienced real estate investor and still have no idea what to do when you get a note, right? Or what the next steps are. So there's a process to it. It's managing other people, managing other servicers. It's not horrible. It's not difficult. It's just there's a process to it. And so how much effort you want to put into it, it's going to give you that much more output and yield. So the more active you are, the higher your return. The less active you are, the lower your return.
Right. So just to give people a little bit of a idea of what you just said, I started my lending career with a partner. I was a co-founder of a mortgage banking company. We did large commercial loans nationwide. We had angel backers, and our minimum loan size was $10 million, and we lent all over the country. When we sold the company, we had over an $8 billion portfolio. When I went to note school for the first time and they said, hey, you can sell a partial, I looked at them and I said, what? I had no idea what a partial was. We had done $8 billion worth of business and I had no idea.
Yeah.
So that's what you mean.
Yeah. It's interesting. All right. Looks like we've wrapped up the board. Thanks, Lisa, again for giving us some comments there. If anybody else has any comments or questions, you can go to our Facebook group and you can ask them there so we can answer them, or you can reach out directly to Justin at brightpathnotes.com or Richard at amnotecap.com. We'll be happy to answer things for you. Anything we discussed today, we're happy to elaborate on. And we'll be talking to you back, in March 9th, I believe. Is that what it is?
I think so.
All right, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks to everyone for being stimulating a lot of good conversation today. We look forward to seeing you next month on our live stream of the Real Estate Note Investing Be the Bank broadcast. All right, I'm Justin Bogard. See you guys.
All right. See you, Justin.